Hello, I hope this video finds you well. Today is day 20 in my daily routine of recording a Codingbat solution every day schools are closed. So with that, let's dive in. We're going to look at stringMatch, warmup 2, and this is the Java implementation. Problem states, given two strings, A and B, return the number of positions where they contain the same length to substring. So this string here and this string here yields 3, since XX, AA, and AZ substrings appear in the same place in both strings. And now let's look at the other examples just to make sure we understand it. And we have that first case from the problem statement. And here ABC and ABC yields 2 because AB and BC both appear in the same position. And ABC, AXC yields 0 because there's no overlap. So when I'm working with students on this problem, I think about three big ideas beyond the Java specifics around return type and all that. The first one is picking the smaller string to set the loop length. So we're going to have to set up a loop to go through the strings and compare the pairs of characters. And if you always pick string A, for example, there could be a case where string A is shorter or longer, and that causes some problems. You always want to loop through the smaller string because the smaller string then, every letter in the smaller string corresponds to a letter in the larger string. The second big idea is we have a reading frame of 2. This is something I've talked about a bit, and I think about reading frame as in the number of characters that I'm inspecting at a time. So in this case, I'm inspecting 2 characters at a time, and knowing this, I'm going to have to change where my loop ends. Let me show you what I mean by that. So in this case, we have A and we have B, and we have the indexes above, and I see that B is a smaller string. So I'm going to set up my loop based on the values of B. And these two X's here, these two capital X's, represent the reading frame. So when I is 0, I'm going to inspect index 0, 1, and then increment I. Inspect index 1, 2, increment I. Inspect index 2, 3, increment I. Inspect index 3, 4, increment I. Inspect index 4, 5, increment I, but I don't want to do any inspection here. So I want my I to reach 4 because if I reach 5, I'm going to end up with an index out of bounds error because I'm trying to compare against a character that doesn't exist there. And the third idea is we have to run a full loop before exiting, so there's no return statement in the loop. And this is a really common place where students make a mistake in this problem, is they actually return the counter as soon as they find their first overlap. But they forget they have to look at everything before they return it. Some of the earlier videos we've been talking about situations where as soon as you find something, if you find your answer, you can stop. So if I'm inspecting, say, a string for the letter A, if A is the first character in the string, I don't have to look at the rest. But in this case, I have to look at all of it. Okay, so I'm going to make an int called L, and I'm going to use the min method, which is contained in the math class. So min is a static method in the math class, and I know it's static because I'm calling it with the name of the class. And I'm going to say a.length, b.length. So essentially, I am finding the minimum length of A and B and storing it in this variable L. So if I return L, which I can do because this function, the return type's an int, I get it wrong almost all the time, but you'll see that I'm always returning the length of the smaller string. See it specifically here. The length is 2, 2. So now I can use this in my loop. So I'm not going to return it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a counter. And this is going to keep track of all the times that we have an overlap. And now I'm going to set up my loop. So for int I equals, and let's look at this concrete case up here. So if I come up here, I want to say I is equal to, I want to start it at 0, and I has to go all the way up to 4. So I'm going to start I at 0, and I'm going to continue as long as I is less than 5. I is equal to I plus 1. Now hopefully if you've been following along, you see my mistake here, but I'm going to play this out and then we'll fix it. And as long as I is less than 5, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say if, and then a dot substring, and I'm going to say, actually I'm not going to use substring, I'm going to use char at. A dot char at I is equivalent to b dot char at I, and a dot char at I plus 1 is equivalent to b dot char at I plus 1. Why did I use char@? Is because I can use the equivalence as opposed to the equals method. Before we're done, I'll go back here and change that. So we're going to say CTR equals CTR plus 1, and I'm going to return CTR outside of the loop. So I hit go, and notice I get a couple of them correct, but I get a lot of index out of bounds errors. And that's because I've set my loop based on this one specific concrete case. So what I need to do now is say, okay, how does 5 relate to the length of that word, which is 6? And we can get 5 by taking the length, which is 6, and minusing 1. But remember, we've stored the length inside this variable L. So I'm going to say I is L minus 1. And there it is. Now, let's just do a couple things before we wrap up here. First thing I want to do is, I said I was going to show that mistake a lot of students make, and a lot of students will do this. And you'll notice that in this case, it runs through, it doesn't crash, but we're getting only 1 or 0. And that's because they're returning CTR as soon as they find one overlap. And that's a problem. So remember to ask yourself, do I have to look at everything before I return a result? Or can I just return a result as soon as I find what I want? Now, the other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to change this just slightly. I use char@ because I wanted to use equivalence, but you could equally do this with substring. So if I go a.substring and I say 0, comma, and then we're going to say, I, comma, I plus 2, inclusive, exclusive, but I have to use the dot equals method. I can't use the equivalent sign. b.substring, I, comma, I plus 2. Braces match up. I don't think so. I think I need one more. There it is. And it works fine as well. Just be careful if you decide to use the substring method, you have to use the equals method to compare them. And the last thing, because someone always comments on this, you don't need the braces here. Because this if statement has a single line of code associated with it, I can remove these. So Java only requires braces if there's more than one line of code inside the block. And in fact, I can remove it for the for loop as well because it thinks of it only as one line because that if is all packaged together. This is a really common structure, especially students writing the AP. This often comes up and will confuse students. This for if with one line is a really common approach. And there we go. I hope this video helped. If anyone out there would really be beneficial, would find it beneficial for me to post my Java solutions on a GitHub repository, please let me know and I'm happy to do that. Have a great day.